And so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our March webinar for the Partners in Flight Migration Ecology Subcommittee. Thanks so much for joining today. We're really excited to host our first ever lightning talk session. And we're hoping that it can help members of this community share their own work and learn about other projects, as well as inspire future projects and collaborations. So we've got about an hour of lightning talks lined up, followed by about 15 minutes or so at the end for questions and discussion. I just wanted to mention again that we have simultaneous English-Spanish interpretation, thanks to the wonderful Claudia, who has been helping us with translation throughout this seminar series. So here on the slide are instructions for accessing interpretation in case you would like it. As always, for questions or our discussion at the end, please feel free to speak in the language of your choice. And the usual Zoom reminder to please mute your mic when you're not speaking. That would be great. And for anyone who's joining us for the first time, welcome. This is a seminar, part of a seminar series hosted by the Migration Ecology Subcommittee, and we're part of the Partners in Flight Science Committee. Our goal for this community is to build a community focused on tracking technologies to fill key knowledge gaps in migration ecology and inform conservation strategies for migratory birds. And we hope that this will be a really interactive space where we can all learn about tracking technologies and explore how we can use them to address conservation questions and share our experiences and brainstorm ideas and collaborate. We have just a couple announcements before we get started with the lightning talks. First, in order to keep being able to offer translation at these webinars, we need to raise money. Funding is tight everywhere, as we know. So we've created a fundraiser through the Birds Caribbean Give Butter account, and our goal is to raise $2,500 over the next few months to fund translation throughout the year. And we have a QR code here for the fundraising page, and we'll also share the link. And we'd really appreciate it if you shared it around with your networks. And we think translation services are critical to this space being inclusive and to everyone in the community being able to express their ideas in the language they're most comfortable with. And finally, a reminder to join our listserv if you haven't, or pass along to anyone who might be interested. We're going to do another round of lightning talks at our May meeting, and we do have a few folks lined up already, but we are looking for a couple more. So if you feel inspired by today's talks to share about your work, we'd love to hear from you. And don't worry if your project is at a very early stage or even just an idea. We'd love to hear about it, and feel free to reach out to any of us co-chairs if you're interested. And there's the QR code for the listserv. I don't know if everyone is seeing a yellow X on my screen. I have no idea where it's come from. Hopefully it's just on my end.
I think you just drew something by accident. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you could do that. Sorry. Okay, I'm almost done here. So finally, we'd like to remind everyone that we've launched a collaboration spreadsheet, and it's a space for developing collaborations around migratory ecology and tracking technologies, and as well as sharing resources for funding or training opportunities, or knowing who to reach out to ask about a particular type of tracking technology. So both opportunities for finding resources and collaborations in there. And yeah, please check it out, and we welcome any suggestions or feedback as well. And all of our recordings, if you missed any in the before and would like to check them out, are on the Partners in Flight YouTube channel. All right, with that, we'll jump into our agenda for today. We have six wonderful speakers lined up from a variety of organizations on diverse topics, from passerine tracking and urban bird ecology to Motus in Northeast Mexico, Bendire's Thrasher, and an expedition along the Pacific Flyway. Each talk will be 7 minutes, followed by 3 minutes for questions, and then we'll have more time for questions at the end of the session. So to keep things moving along on time, we do have some bird calls to signal when you have 1 minute left. You'll hear a screaming peahaw song, and then when the full 7 minutes has elapsed, we have a northern bentbill song. For the audience, please feel free to put questions in the chat throughout the session, and during the question and discussion periods, feel free to unmute and speak or use the chat. All right, and with that, I will stop sharing my screen. And I would like to welcome our first speaker, Alicia Brenner, who is a program manager with Audubon's Migratory Bird Tracking Program. Thanks, Alicia, and over to you.
All right. Everything look good, Amy? Thank you for that intro. And thank you so much for inviting me here. Yeah, you unmuted. Sorry, we good?
Oh, sorry, you
Okay.
look great. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to join this community and start attending these meetings and this subcommittee as a part of my new position with Audubon. It's been almost a year now that I've been in this position as the program manager for migratory bird tracking. It's a brand new position at Audubon, and it's a part of the Migratory Bird Initiative. And I work with folks like Bill DeLuca and Jill Deppy to understand how we can better use tracking technologies to inform conservation across the Western Hemisphere. And I did want to start out just introducing myself since I'll be attending these meetings. And I think yeah, I would just like to get to know each one of you and what research you've been doing. And so, kind of before this position, I've been tracking birds for more than 10 years. My expertise is in neotropical migratory songbirds. I started using Motus 10 years ago when I was doing research on non-breeding migratory warblers in the long-term study site in Jamaica, where I looked at fine scale movements and habitat use and space use of Swainson's warblers and ovenbirds and American redstarts. And since then, I moved up into the breeding grounds where I studied black-throated blue warblers at Hubbard Brook Experimental Forest, where I did my dissertation to try to understand how changing climate across the past few decades has influenced departure timing, migratory behaviors, and all that fun stuff. And so that really fun research and kind of passion for that kind of research led me to this really cool job where I actually get to be tracking migratory birds to inform conservation, which is insane to me that I am able to do that work. So I'm incredibly excited to share with you some of the really cool projects that we have. And to just kind of give a little pitch for this new thing at Audubon, the Migratory Bird Tracking Program, which was launched last summer. And it's basically just this kind of Audubon network wide initiative to coordinate and collaborate on individual level tracking efforts across Audubon and beyond, both with internal partners and external partners and collaborations to figure out when and where migratory birds are facing the biggest threats across their full annual cycle and across their entire Western Hemisphere. Basically, trying to understand and put our heads together to allow tracking data to better inform our conservation efforts through the Audubon network on the ground. And this is a very true lightning talk format. I think it's going to be a lot of information. I wanted to share with you just kind of a few projects that we've had ongoing in this past year. So there's a lot of, so my expertise is in songbirds, but the tracking program includes all of Audubon priority species. And so it's exciting for me to learn more about tracking shorebirds and tracking raptors and all that stuff. But so this runs the gamut. So we're using all different types of tracking technologies to inform all different types of conservation questions. One project that was really exciting this past summer, we deployed low-tech nano tags on 20 rehabilitated chimney swifts at one of our Audubon centers, Sharon Audubon in Connecticut, to understand the efficacy of their rehabilitation program of chimney swifts, where they get hundreds of chimney swift nestlings every single year and are really wondering, do they survive after we release them into the wild? What are they doing? And obviously, we all know that chimney swifts are super mysterious. And so, just trying to use the Motus network to learn more about chimney swift migration ecology and maybe some non-breeding ecology and movement as well. And so, that's ongoing. Hopefully, we get some more detections when birds are migrating up in the spring. And so, we'll kind of get a good understanding of what we can learn about chimney swifts with Motus. Our second project that we have ongoing is this collaboration with folks in Colombia, out of Cali, where we're trying to understand how lesser yellowlegs that are overwintering or non-breeding in the Cauca Valley of Colombia are using regenerative agriculture and local farms, that we have programs that transform sugarcane fields into flooded rice fields during the period of time that's really important for these non-breeding lesser yellowlegs, and trying to understand with Argos sunbird tags from low-tech really fine scale movements and understand from a field to field basis what these birds are doing and why they're moving and when, and what kinds of habitats are they using across these farms in the Cauca Valley. And then obviously they're sunbird tags, so they're solar and hopefully they last the lifetime of the birds. And so we get really great fine scale information from that. So hopefully we'll be able to understand a little bit more about our conservation efforts of regenerative agriculture on the ground. And then lastly, we have this incredible collaboration with many different organizations and universities, including Vermont Center for Eco Studies, Birds Canada, Guelph University, where it's called the Safe Passes Project. And we are tagging migratory songbirds to understand wind turbine collision risks across both the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic coast. And these species include Swainson's warblers, prothonotary warblers that are being tagged in the southeast, and also blackpoll warblers and Bicknell's thrush that are being tagged across their entire range, to better understand with barometric pressure geolocators altitude and if these birds are at risk of collision as they start migrating over the Atlantic coast. I'm hearing some music on someone's maybe non-muted in the background. Sorry. It's not coming from me. So yeah, so those are a few. So we have a few different kind of levels of conservation questions that we are getting at here with three different key technologies that we are using. And so these are kind of the projects that are really good representations of what we want to accomplish with the tracking program. And these are projects that we are looking for actively to collaborate with partners with. So if you are tracking lesser yellowlegs or any of these migratory warblers or chimney swifts and beyond in terms of these different types of conservation questions, we are definitely looking to collaborate. We really want to expand on some of these projects into range-wide questions where we're really getting at population level consequences to some of these conservation questions and weaving in migratory connectivity and all those really important ecological facets for these species to really understand their ecology and better conserve them on the ground. We also have a couple of, we're really going hard in on the Motus stations as well to really fill out a lot of the holes in terms of our Motus network and also for education and outreach, basically, because we're Audubon and we really want to use Motus as this great opportunity to educate the public and get them excited about individual tracking. And we all know how important that is. Great, thank you, Anna. And so we had this really fun opportunity to expand at the Motus stations on the Yucatan Peninsula to benefit both projects that are tracking birds or tagging birds in North America and South America, and birds that are crossing over the Gulf in both spring and fall migration. And so this past just a couple of months ago, we revamped these towers and put in some stacked Yagis that will hopefully get really great range and detections across the Yucatan Peninsula. So stay tuned. I'm keeping a close eye on those during spring migration. So hopefully we get some really awesome detections from birds that were tagged during the non-breeding season. And also we're amping up our education and outreach at Audubon centers. There's a lot of buy-in from the Audubon staff and leadership to integrate Motus better into our engagement and community science and community building. So we're kind of slowly hacking away at getting some Motus stations up at our sanctuaries and centers and getting Audubon chapters involved as well. So it's very exciting. And this is basically just a big pitch that this is not holistically representative of all the projects. We have a lot more projects happening across Audubon. And like I said, we're really wanting to expand these out into range wide, especially these tagging projects using all sorts of cool technologies. So please contact me if you are tagging some of these species and are looking to combine data, combine brains. We are definitely looking for partners and collaborations. So thank you. That's it.
Wonderful. Thanks, Alicia. I think I did see one question for you in the chat here from David Mizrahi, who asked, how are the sunbird tags attached to the lesser yellowlegs?
They are leg loop harnesses with stretch magic.
Great.
And so
Thanks.
that was, yep. Yeah. Simple answer.
All right. Perhaps if anyone else has one more question while our next speaker, Barbara, pulls up slides, go right ahead. But don't see any others in the chat, but we can also we'll have some time to ask more questions for Alicia at the end. So I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker, Barbara Fry, who is a research scientist with Environment and Climate Change Canada. Thanks, Barbara.
Awesome, thanks. So thanks, everyone. Lots of exciting work already being presented, so maybe I can add a little bit to that. So my work specifically focuses currently in my role as a research scientist at Environment and Climate Change Canada on the urban landscapes, and I'm really interested during the birds passing through these areas in the migration season because of the biases so far that has been looking at these places during the breeding season. I'm going over this really quick because we all are quite familiar to this, but each year 5 billion birds travel across North America during migration. And this map that I'm showing is particularly showing some of the anthropogenic landscapes in Canada, where I work, in orange, and showing the boreal forests and the temperate forests above. But seeing that birds have to cross this gauntlet of these kind of landscapes at least twice a year, it's really not if, but when birds are encountering urban areas. And we do know that not only are they encountering that they're drawn through them through light, and that they can have these novel threats that occur in these places, window collisions being, of course, a huge one, being predated on by cats, although that might be almost more sometimes in the rural landscapes or farm landscapes. But there's all these threats and dangers, but also this great potential to harness the green spaces that do exist in these landscapes, whether it's from a large city to a smaller town, to be these stepping stones to help birds along their migration. And we're really not looking at that very much from a conservation perspective and putting that in our management plans when we're looking at these boreal breeding birds or other birds that don't usually breed in cities. So some of the questions myself and my research team are asking is, what is even the diversity of birds migrating through cities? And we're trying to break that preconceived notion that it's only like sky rats, like our pigeons and our house sparrows and our starlings that are found in cities. We also want to look at how long birds spend in or near cities, because we think we're underestimating the amount of time that certain species, like the blue-headed vireo, that is, boreal breeding songbird, but does obviously pass through urban landscapes during migration. And then the last piece is how can we manage our cities for migratory birds and more, since if we make places good for birds, we often make places good for a lot of other things, including ecosystem services and human well-being. I'm not going to talk about that aspect too much in this talk. And I want to give a shout out to the great number of people I work at with academic collaborators and my fantastic research technician, Anna Morales. So two different ways that I'm going to talk about that we look at this is using both tracking technologies as well as audio recording units. So when we're surveying birds, especially during the migration period, it's just impossible to go to every green space or every location every morning while migration is changing during that spring breeding period. But thanks to new technology, such as these autonomous recording units and machine learning algorithms, such as Nighthawk and that will allow us to actually identify songs, we've been able to do this. So this is data that comes from 2 springs and 2 summers across 44 listening locations in Canada's second largest city, Montreal. And we found that these urban green spaces we were looking at actually support a really high diversity of migratory and resident breeding birds, including species at risk. So a quarter of the urban parks that we surveyed had species at risk in the summer, such as the eastern wood pewee and the wood thrush, but then 3/4 of those urban parks and green spaces supported species at risk during spring migration, such as surprise visits from evening grosbeaks and Canada warblers, even in some of our most dense downtown areas where there's still these green spaces. So again, we're kind of challenging what is considered an urban bird, and especially the difference that makes between the summer and the non-breeding period is that, for example, on our sites, we had a mean number of 24 species during the breeding season, but 14 of these were what we call priority species. And this priority species list were species that were listed by COSEWIC or our species at risk legislation, ones that had what was considered below acceptable population levels, or those that had large to moderate rates of decline, and where Canada had a large importance in conserving that species groups. So we had 14 of those priority species during the summer, and 4 of those were very common. So they formed more than 50% of the sites. So it's not just a one-off that they're there, they're commonly found. And this compares to 72 species during the spring non-breeding migratory season, with 24 priority species and half of those being found at more than 50% of those sites. And, there's more research ongoing. We're really trying to bring together that tie of how we're managing our cities, the birds that are found in them, and the people that benefit from them. So this is other work that is ongoing, where we're continuing to look at Migratory, or these small urban parks, different urban parks, people's backyards, and looking at the equitable access to different communities, whether it's new immigrant, elderly, or children, to accessing these really rich, biodiverse green spaces and all the benefits that they can get from the birds in these places. And then we're also looking at stopover duration ecology of birds in or near cities. I won't have to talk to this group about how banding and telemetry works. So I'll continue saying that this was a series of different research projects that we put out over 250 Motus nano tags on 6 different boreal breeding species. And we found that during that fall migration, these species can spend days, weeks, or even months, in the case of remote migrants, in or near cities. So these were, again, all boreal breeding songbirds. They were not breeding in Montreal area. These were purely these transient species that we always assumed were just spending 1 or 2 days here, and they're spending quite a bit of time. And this is at a single stopover location. So again, thinking about how this cumulative effect may be. Yes, maybe that hermit thrush or that magnolia yellow rump warbler is only spending 10 to 14 days at our site, or even sometimes up to 20. But if they're doing that along several stopovers, again, in these urban landscapes, where recent radar technology has actually showed that almost half of these migratory stopovers in the US hotspots were actually in urban landscapes. And some of what we're trying to communicate with when we're talking about our decision makers and land managers in or near cities is the importance of forest edges and shrubs. So we did different tracking, translocation studies, as well as looking at fecal DNA from our birds. And we really see this preference for these forest edges, shrubby habitats, and the importance of our native trees and plants, especially the ones producing berries and other food resources. And these kind of landscapes or these kind of habitats are often under considered when it's managed for aesthetic reasons for people. So they don't like shrubby things. So we're trying to say like shrubs for birds when we're planning our forests and conserving our parks. And this work is ongoing. We do have new work going on in a really highly urbanized landscape in Antonio Park in the Bendire. So you can see that in that left upper picture, that green area that's really surrounded by gray. It's a great park. It's a very well-used park. And we're working with the city to go out, put up a Motus tower and do some more banding there. We were really surprised by all the lovely species that we caught in our first fall, including a white-eyed vireo, which was one of the first times that it was seen, at least by me, on the island of Montreal. And we're going to continue doing tracking. We're going to be testing out some CTT tags as well, which work on mobile, that ping off people's mobile phones, which works really great in an urban park. We have people everywhere with their phones. And continuing to look at diet through fecal DNA to compare their ecology in this really urban space compared to other peri-urban areas. So I think the bird didn't come when it should, but that's okay. I'll stop talking now and thank everyone oh, they're right on time. Thank everyone, and to highlight that this was really a big collaborative work with lots of great community partners and students and technicians. And this is just my shout out to let's continue talking about the importance of cities for birds and the difference that it can make. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Barbara. That's really cool work. We have a 1 minute maybe for questions right now for Barbara, if anyone has any. I don't see any in the chat, but feel free to put any more in the chat or save them for the discussion at the end. But if there are no questions right now, I think we can move to our next presenter. And I'll do my best to maybe switch to Spanish here. So es un placer presentarles a nuestro próximo ponente, Néstor Iván Ascensión.
So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our next presenter, Néstor Ascensión. He is the leader of Pronatura Noroeste and the projects in the Northern Desert in
I was
the
just
US.
wondering if I need to do anything else for, the change of language.
No, I think
That's it. Just start.
Yeah, you can just start. And I think if everyone has, for folks who want to listen in English, just make sure you're in the English interpretation channel. And yeah.
All right. First thing first. Thank you so much for everyone to stay here. Let's change to Spanish. Mi nombre es Néstor Iván Ascensión Ríos.
My name is Néstor Iván Ascensión Ríos. I am a biologist and the leader of projects in Pronatura Noroeste. I currently have been in charge of this, let's call it that, for 3 years for the implementation of the Motus network in the northwest of Mexico, and this is what I'm going to speak about today.
So it's all right for everyone?
I think it's good, but it is good to keep in mind to speak relatively slowly, just so Claudia has time to provide the translation.
Sure.
Necesitamos.
Okay. El día de hoy vamos a compartir
So today we are going to share some of the work that we have been carried out since 2023, and that's still ongoing regarding the planning for the Motus network in the Northwest. First of all, I would like to share if you've had the opportunity to get to know Mexico, and the Northwest is very diverse. I work from Chihuahua, so we have grasslands, for example, forests, and we have a really wide range to do work on, and all of these heterogeneous ecosystems become really relevant and critical to conservation, which is what ProNatura Noroeste is trying to do in Mexico to protect and preserve ecosystems and species. Within the conservation efforts, we all have these contexts, the GPCAs, which are protected areas within the desert in Chihuahua, and we also have the protected natural areas, ANP for its acronym in Spanish, and these are areas where we have low human activity, so it's a true bastion of conservation because there we can find the ecological stability that some migratory species require. So this is one of our main focus points when we start developing the network. And when we start doing the planning for developing the network in the northwest of Mexico. So why are we investing resources, time, and space to develop this network? Because we understand, or we have come to understand, how useful this is for other initiatives that also work within the same geography in a parallel way, and how this information that we continue to generate in our Motus stations is allowing us to integrate parameters that were not so easy to notice within the conservation areas. And once we started to understand how the migratory movements interact at a low and big scale, then we can identify which are the priority areas, which areas need less intervention, and also we understand more the use of habitats for species that we can consider indicators of the ecosystem. So we'll talk about it more in a little bit, and also how long the journey it is for the individuals that are visiting the areas. And actually this week we did a round here in Chihuahua for the Motus stations, and Harriet Bailey from Cornell was part of the team. We were recording in one of the sites. We have 2 years of data of species that visit the same spots in Chihuahua. So we assume that those ranches are carrying out good conservation efforts for the grasslands, and they have the right conditions because the birds continue to go back every year. Now, here at ProNatura Noroeste, we are implementing sustainable livestock is one of the models or programs, strongest programs that we have, along with the monitoring program. And we want to gather in a precise way the information that we can get from the detections with Motus. And of course, tracking the health of the grasslands. We can use indicator species like the grasshopper sparrow, which are highly specialized and tend to feed on grasslands that are very useful for livestock foraging or cattle foraging. So that helps us interpret along with the previous analysis of the data to determine what would be the best way to have a sustainable management property by property. And that way, with all of this accumulation of efforts, we have improved the production of livestock and we have enough habitat for those birds that need the grasslands to survive. Now, we also want to mention what already exists. This is the first section of the Motus network of the northwest of Mexico. We were able to do it thanks to Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. These were deployed between 2023 and 2024. And talking about priority areas for conservation, we are present in 7 of them. We also are present in 2 of the national protected areas. And here on the slide, you can see some of the priority species. Of course, we have an endless list of priority species. However, these are our focal species when we were developing the project. And they have been very successful. Actually, we've had many detections. However, today we want to share part of the planning as well because we don't have enough because it's such a big area that we can't stop there. We have to continue developing more projects. Of course, all of this, it's only still in our desks. On our desks, we are planning, we are visiting some sites to see how feasible it would be to put them there. We already have an analysis of priority works. We have 3 main points, which are the mountain chains, Sierra Madre Oriental and Occidental, the wetlands, the continental wetlands, which we forget about, and they are very important for some water birds, and also the Great Plains and the Chihuahuan Desert. So the first steps in the Laguna Madre Lagoon in Tamaulipas, Mexico, we are on the second phase of expansion of the northwest, along with Environmental and Climate Change Canada. It's Project 871. And there we are planning to develop a bit more through all of these land protection schemes that allow us to have an approach not only based on conservation, bird conservation especially because it is our objective. But for example, we've also been able to detect the bats. They were not part of our main conservation goal. However, they are also impacted. And we've had a couple of good news. The monarch butterflies. I saw that a lot of them that were tagged in the US were detected in Mexico. So maybe this is something we can also consider to think about conservation impacts or conservation actions. Here you can see the 4 stations that we have here. The red points, that was an effort, a statewide effort, along with the government of Tamaulipas with a focus on monarch butterflies. So this also allows us to diversify our efforts in this area. And everything adds up or sums up, is summed up in this map. The stars are the motor stations that we already have. And as you can see that although we have a big presence in the area, we still have a lot of gaps that we need to fill out. So we are planning to continue expanding towards either mountain chains, to either wetlands in the coast or inland. And that is all the information that I wanted to share today, what we were doing, what we have done, what we are doing, and what we want to do. So this is our contact information in case you found it useful. Thank you so much, Nestor.
any questions for Nestor while we get the next presentation set up? I'm going to pull up the slides for our next presenter. So if anyone has a question, feel free to jump in while I'm doing that. Okay. I think unless there are any quick questions right now, I think we can move to our next lightning talk. Bob, are you there? Our next speaker is Bob Fisher from Bird Conservation Network. See Bob in the participant list here. And I think I don't think I can directly unmute you, Bob, but I did ask to unmute.
Bob, can you hear us? Okay, well, maybe for now we could.
Yeah, I don't know if you have powers that I don't, Maya, to unmute.
I also did the ask to unmute button. I don't think I have direct power either.
Yeah, Bob did send me a message saying I might have to unmute him, but I'm not sure I can force that. I can just send a request. Okay, Bob, if you can unmute and speak, that would be great. But if not, maybe we'll move to the next talk and then try again. Okay, we will try with Bob again after the next talk. But I will introduce our next speaker in the meantime. Next up, we have Tim Daubert, who's an explorer and conservation scientist with Wings of Survival. And I will hand it over to you, Tim. Thanks for jumping in a little ahead of schedule.
Sure, thanks so much. Am I pulling up? Or is that me sharing my screen?
I'm not seeing it yet.
Okay, should I do it? Okay.
Yes, or would you like me to do it? I do have your slides.
No, that's fine. I wasn't sure if I'm doing it. I'll give it a try. Is that good?
Looks great.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks very much. And I'm proposing an initiative called Wings of Survival, and it's proposed as the a world first race with nature. And essentially, it's built around 3 expeditions, so it's a trilogy, and it's 2 athletes. So it's Liana, my partner, and myself, with the idea of traversing 3 different flyways to follow bird migrations. So it's literally inspired by the greatest athletes on the planet, which are migratory birds. I think for us as humans, we're quite happy if we can do a marathon or maybe an Ironman in our lifetime, but we all know what birds are doing is is pretty unreal. And I come from a background, I'm not a bird expert, but my background is in conservation science. I'm usually based in Edmonton. And I think one of the challenges we face is communicating science and just having lots of data and lots of facts, but it's so abstract. And even the migration of birds, it's so unreal, but it's very abstract for humans to actually grasp what it means for a bird to fly across the ocean, across the Pacific, or across a flyway. So I think one of the takeaways from wandering through academia all the way to finishing a couple of postdocs is that it takes a human element to convey natural stories. So the first expedition that we're proposing to do is to cycle from Prudhoe Bay all the way to the tip of South America, and we're starting 1st of July. We're going to follow the Wimbrel. So we just spent, about 2 months ago, we went to Chiloé Island in Chile, and we teamed up with Chris Giulielmo from Western University in Canada and Juan Navedo, who's running the Austral Shorebird Alliance, who are very experienced in tagging birds. So we got Low-Tech to sponsor 5 GPS devices. So we managed to catch 9 birds and got those 5 trackers installed, so we can now see those birds moving. As you know, ideally they'll be going to Alaska. And then in summer, we're going to start this parallel journey. And the idea is to reconnect with those same individuals again in Patagonia. So that gives us about 9 months. It's roughly 30,000 kilometers. So it's a decent kind of physical undertaking. And the idea is to build bridges between this human experience and the birds. And we do a lot of science. We do quite a bit of education. So to give some examples, obviously putting GPS trackers on birds is already gives us scientific insights into migration. We look at diversity of birds, so we'll take some acoustic monitoring devices. We look at road casualties along this kind of perhaps the longest natural history transect that we could possibly study. We do we work with scientists who study us as humans, so they look at our resilience in terms of both physiology and psychology, and it's really trying to collect content which allows us to build those bridges between the human and avian experience. And then in terms of education, we've teamed up with an organization called Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, based in Eastern Canada. It's a lengthy and cool name, but it's also a fantastic organization. So Joe and his team, they connect scientists and explorers in the field to classrooms virtually. So we'll be bringing students across this 9 months journey. So every week for perhaps 30 minutes on a set day, we're going to invite classrooms across the flyway to ask questions, to learn more about birds, to be immersed into the story. So that's a fantastic education element. We do have a lot of media interest already. We do work with a number of brands across sports, nature, kind of the range of topics that we're touching. I suppose we do have a film production company called Moving Artistry Productions. And Justin's been following us for the last 4 years. So there's a lot of content already collected in various places across the flyway, Patagonia, Alaska, Colombia, Canada, of course. We do have a co-producer who's very experienced in kind of planet Earth type films based in Bristol in the UK. So that's a huge component in terms of storytelling. We just got a vehicle sponsored after many years of trying. That's been quite tedious. So that's really a big game changer for us in terms of having it's a safety component, but it also allows us to really bring people into the story. So it's not so much just a survival trek for us, but it's an opportunity to have Starlink on board and, as I said, virtually bring people on this ride. And I want to keep it quite short in case there's questions. But as I said, we're starting 1st of July. It's about 3 months away. I'm always keen to create partnerships if there's interest from organizations working on flyways, working on migratory birds to be part of the story in some capacity. It's a little bit hard for us to schedule events because it's hard to predict where we're going to be exactly on what day. But if there's interest to kind of team up for events in certain locations with a bit of flexibility, we'd definitely be very keen to explore those opportunities.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Sounds super cool and like quite the adventure. Yeah, and yeah, starting pretty soon, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's a bit nerve-wracking, but sorry, are you managing the questions? Okay, I'll let you.
Yes, I see there is one in the chat here that asks, have you thought of attaching a transmitter of some kind to your helmet or bike?
Yeah, I like this. We've been in touch with Birds Canada for quite some time, and I can't say it's gotten too far, but there's definitely been the idea of putting a Motus device, like kind of carrying a Motus device to promote the Motus network and sort of how it's expanding into the Americas. As I mentioned, Chris Guglielmo, who's been part of the tagging in Chile. I think he's been running this Motus on the Move initiative. So I definitely love to do it. Yeah.
Great. A couple more questions in the chat here. One from Tom Will asks, will you be traveling only by bicycle?
Yeah, good question. We do have the Darien Gap interruption, so we've got our pack rafts. So the idea is to change into our rafts and kind of pack raft on the Caribbean side. Otherwise, it's mostly cycling. We could run, but we're not going to make it in 9 months. So. But trying to be unmotorized.
Yeah. Neat. And then one question from Anna here. How do you plan to do the outreach to all the kids around the world? I love the idea of virtual classrooms to share your journey and the journey of migratory birds.
Yeah, so this is something that Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants is hosting. So Joe's going to give us a Starlink device. And he's been doing this for maybe a decade, and they reach over 100,000 students every year. So he's very experienced. He's basically setting everything up, and then we just have to connect. So it's I don't know the details as to how he's kind of doing it, but it's very straightforward on our end.
Awesome, thanks. I think we can probably move to our next talk. Bob is having some technical difficulties, so I think we'll maybe move to Corey's talk next, and I'll see if during Corey's talk I can help figure those technical difficulties out with Bob. So our next presentation is from Corey Borgman, who is a migratory bird biologist with the Division of Migratory Birds in the Southwest region with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Thanks so much, Corey.
No problem. Are you all seeing my screen? It's probably not in presentation mode. You see my screen and you see just the presentation, right?
We do see the notes. So yeah, if you click display settings there and swap.
How's that?
Yeah, perfect.
Excellent. All righty. Well, I will go ahead and dive right in. I guess this is a little bit more zoomed in talk than the previous, but that's fine. So this is a project that myself and Chrissy Condrat, my colleague from Arizona Game and Fish, dreamed up and then executed with help from many others. And because it's kind of understudied on relatively unknown bird, I'll just briefly give a dive into Bendire's Thrasher, which is a thrasher species that's globally restricted to the arid habitats in North America, so southwestern United States, northwest Mexico, Pretty difficult to detect. It's cryptic. It's a brown bird in a brown habitat. Spend a lot of time on the ground. They breed early. They breed at kind of random times based on resources. So there's a lot we don't know about the bird. And then not going to go into this a ton either, but unfortunately, this is a species that we find on virtually every list you'd like to not be on, and notably was petitioned for listing under ESA last year. And so some of those knowledge gaps, one of the knowledge gaps that we wanted to address was what the migratory behaviors were. So the range map shows that the northern populations are migratory, whereas the southern populations are year-round resident. But any of the details of that are relatively not understood. What are the things that define that? And also what are the destinations in Mexico? And of course, what are the characteristics of those habitat-wise? So what we did is this is about a 60-gram bird, so there's not a ton of tagging options for a bird that size that are affordable. So we went with the archival GPS tags from Low-Tech. And those, of course, the downside of that is that you have to physically retrieve those units to get the data off. So we targeted males primarily. They're since we have to trap them twice, they're a little more, they're more territorial. They're more into our getup. So and then we program those tags. They can carry a finite number of points. We targeted the wintering locations, and we were able to get a few transit points, but we really prioritized those winter locations. We had 5 sites in Arizona and New Mexico. I'm just going to talk about the 3 circled here. These are the sites where we had birds that were migratory. And so there's kind of a lot going on the map, but the Sierra Ladrones, that's central New Mexico, the Boot Heel, southwestern New Mexico, and Wickiup or Joshua Tree IBA is kind of northwestern Arizona, not too terribly far from Vegas. And these range from Mojave to Colorado Plateau, and range in elevations. And just jumping right into the results. Overall, we deployed 54 tags at these 3 sites that I'm talking about here. We had 42, and we had pretty variable return rates to those sites. So in the Joshua Tree, a good number of birds came back, whereas many fewer were refound again in the Sierra Ladrones. Overall, though, we had a pretty great recovery rate for tags of these types. So amongst these 3 sites, we had about 40% tag recovery, which I think is pretty great. And of these 3 sites, of the birds we tagged there, only 1 didn't migrate. So got some information about those. And let's see, so this is a map showing all of the wintering locations from all the birds from all the populations. And so mostly it's a pretty broad area, but it was interesting that most of the birds ended up in this broad area around Hermosillo, Sonora. There was a few birds that pulled up and spent the winter kind of along the Mexico-US border, but the vast majority were in and around Hermosillo with it's a big area, but and then we had some interesting observations of birds from different breeding populations wintering in pretty close proximity to each other. Another, this is a map showing kind of all of it's basically connect the dots. Many of the birds are a single point at breeding and a single point at wintering, but not all. Kind of the most, I think, interesting observation that we had from these is the difference in departure dates. So the birds from the Joshua Tree site in Arizona left their breeding grounds in late July, whereas the birds in the New Mexico sites, which are a little higher and drier, left in late August or September. And generally speaking, the birds kind of covered the same amount of ground per day, no real differences there. And then this is a figure illustrating the birds that we had that were from different breeding populations ending up in the same wintering areas. So the figure on the left is a bird from the Joshua Tree site in Arizona and a bird from the Boot Heel site in New Mexico, and basically the same drainage system, less than 5 kilometers apart. And then another example from birds from the Sierra Ladrones and Joshua Tree, all within 15 kilometers of each other. So this was a fun observation and a cool observation. I think it offers some opportunities for conservation. It also offers some opportunities thinking about Nestor's talk about Motus. I think there's some great opportunities for Motus potential in Sonora. I know there's some locations along the coast, but not a lot inland. And I think there could be some opportunities to get people engaged in Sonora. And then another observation, we don't have enough points to do something like a resource selection. But we did have some observations about general characteristics that are on the wintering sites. And so just similar to the breeding sites, there was a heavy dependence on desert washes. This is a really common and important habitat feature of the breeding grounds as well. And then also the birds on the breeding grounds and it turns out on the wintering grounds don't seem to shy away from disturbance. So we had definitely had some proximity to agricultural habitats, to rural housing developments, and roads were a pretty common feature for all of the areas on the wintering grounds, and this is not dissimilar to the breeding grounds. Yeah, this is a snapshot in time. There's still uncertainty. This is a couple years. We don't know if there's a fidelity to those wintering locations or if the migratory behaviors are variable annually. Of course, we'd like to get better information about winter habitat, and also whether or not that winter habitat is occupied during the breeding season as well. And this is something that we've already started working with our Mexican partners to try to help us, determine whether or not those sites are occupied. So that's something we're working on already. And yeah, just to wrap it up, that's a really quick synopsis. I could tell you a lot more about the project and about other Thrasher's goings on, but it was a fun project to do. It was really great to see it come to light, and it couldn't have been done without so many different partners. So I'm happy to talk Thrashers anytime. Also, just want to plug we recently completed a conservation strategy. Well, I guess it wasn't so recent anymore, about a year, but it has been translated to Spanish and both versions are on our website, which I can share later. But thanks. If there's any questions, happy to chat.
Great talk. Thanks, Corey.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for Corey? Just taking a look at the chat here. Seems like there's some good ideas about collaboration in there.
Yeah, and I see Adam posted the links to our Spanish and English conservation strategies for your reading pleasure.
Wonderful. Okay, I think Bob may be trying to rejoin the meeting in a moment here to see if we can sort out the technical difficulty. But in the meantime, I think we could probably open the floor up for questions for all of the presenters. So if anyone has any questions for any of the folks who have given lightning talks today, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions or put them in the chat and I can read them out. Yeah, and thank you so much to all of the presenters so far for some really awesome and interesting talks. I do see there's a question from Jeff Bueller in the chat here asking is eBird data useful for determining wintering areas?
Yeah, I saw that. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, that we have used it some. There's just not a ton of eBird data, period, in that part of Mexico. There's definitely some, and they've been helpful. And actually, since we've done this project, we've had our Mexican partners in Sonora have been working to just collect more baseline Thrasher data. So we have a kind of easy to implement survey methodology that they've been out. I think they like quadrupled the amount of data for Bendire Thrashers in Sonora in one season. So not a ton to start with, but definitely useful still.
Great, thank you. I see we have another question in the chat here that I can read out. It's from Jonathan Valdez from BirdLife Americas. Happy to be here and see some familiar faces, having some connection problems, so writing the question. And the question can be for any of the presenters. How can current monitoring and technology priorities largely focused on boreal migratory species be better aligned with austral migrant species conservation needs? And how can we fill key data gaps in the Amazon basin where eBird can't help and distributions of migratory birds seem diffuse and makes it look like that the Amazon isn't not important for migratory birds? I'm not sure if any of the presenters or anyone else, also welcome to jump in, has an idea on aligning conservation strategies between boreal and austral migrants. Maybe we can have a moment for folks to think about that question. I'll try to think about it too. Sorry, I'm also trying to sort out some technical issues for Bob. I do have a question for that we could, while folks are thinking about that one, for Alicia about the Audubon's migratory bird tracking program. I was curious for the wind energy exposure risk question. I think you might have mentioned it, but I just wanted to clarify if you were just interested in offshore wind or whether both offshore and onshore wind projects. And in the case of land-based wind project, kind of what the time frame of your project was looking at. I'm asking because I do a fair bit of Motus tracking in northeastern British Columbia, and there's quite a lot of new wind energy development happening in the region where the infrastructure isn't built yet, but some of these projects are being fast-tracked, and there's likely to be quite a few new wind farms in the next few years. So wondering what the time frame of the project was.
Yeah, for this project in particular, we are focused on offshore wind. Um, it was a grant that we received actually before I came on by the Mass CEC. Apologies, I can't remember what CEC stands for. But it was an external grant that we received to study songbirds specifically in offshore wind. Basically, to understand right as birds start taking off for fall migration from the coast, are they just like having severe impacts with these offshore wind turbines? I would say that that's the question is easily expanded into, other facets of their migration, other flyways. Um, but I'm not sure I mean for this project in specific, it's just this year, and we're deploying tags this summer. We've already deployed barometric pressure tags last year, and even the year before, some of our Audubon, South Carolina, and Delta folks have been deploying barometric pressure tags on Swainson's warblers and prothonotary warblers to look at this as well. So it's kind of a few years in the making, and we're deploying more tags this summer. So it's kind of continuing for the next couple of years because obviously we won't get the data until the summer after, since they're archival. So yeah, I guess that answers that question. It's definitely an ongoing project, and would be cool to see how deploying tags, even for those blackpoll warblers will be deploying tags in Alaska and in other places throughout Canada. So we will be able to see their flight height as they're passing potentially some of these other wind turbine fields or whatever you would call them. So we could probably look more into that on the way. Yeah.
Yeah. And okay, so yeah, they're the barometric pressure tags on black poles as well. And those are not right now, they're not integrated at all with Motus, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're in super, super early stages, but may have some opportunities to get some Motus stations associated with potentially some of these new wind energy sites in northeastern BC. So there might be some Motus opportunities there in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, with this project too, we'll be deploying Motus tags on black poles that we tag across their range up there as well. So that would be great.
Yeah, we already do have a number of Motus stations in the region that maybe any tagged in Alaska might get detected off if they follow some of the same general routes as some of the bank swallows that stations have picked up coming kind of from that southeastern kind of migratory track. Yeah, so we have a number of stations in the region, though none at wind energy sites yet, but hoping we might get some at those sites in the future. I see Nick Bailey has a hand up. Nick, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I just had enough time to think about Jonathan's question to come up with some answers. So in terms of the Amazon, I don't really see it as an issue that eBird can't produce useful information for the Amazon, but what we need is a much higher density of observers. So I've been pushing for a couple of years, trying to get projects where essentially just go to lots of communities across the Amazon, train them in bird identification and the use of eBird just to start getting more regular data coming from that region. So I think it's more a capacity issue rather than eBird is not capable of providing useful information for that region. And certainly just targeted surveys across the Amazon using eBird would actually greatly help increase what, the little information there is for some regions so far. So that on the Amazon piece. In terms of boreal and austral migrants, there's quite a bit of work has been done by Valentina Gomez on the areas they share, particularly in the Orinoco Plains or Llanos of Colombia, that some of it's out already, but a lot of it's work in progress. So that's kind of, yeah, there is work in progress on that question, which is super interesting, where Valentina's found, which is a paper came out late last year, that ephemeral islands in rivers in this area are used as roosting sites by fork-tailed flycatchers, austral migrants that are coming up from the south, and simultaneously by Dixicels, barn swallows, and others. And you're getting concentrations of thousands of birds on these islands. So there's some really cool overlap in certain areas between these boreal breeding migrants and austral breeding migrants, but wintering or passing through the same areas. So I think there's a lot of relevance for that, particularly within that Llanos region, because many of those austral migrants are savanna birds, birds of open habitats. They don't often share the same habitats as many of our forest-dwelling boreal migrants, but particularly in those savannas, you do get that overlap with certain species.
Thanks, Nick. That's really helpful. I see there have been a few more answers and thoughts on that question in the chat as well. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Anna.
No sé, tengo que hablar en español en este canal, ¿verdad? Okay.
Okay, I'm going to speak in Spanish in this channel. I just have a follow-up question for Nick. I love that you're working with communities in the Amazon basin to develop the use of eBird. And my question is, how are you incentivizing the local communities and remote areas where there is not a big potential for birdwatching tourism to use eBird and start recording data? Because as you know, and we've discussed it with you and Sheila, we want to do the same in La Mosquita, which is very remote, very difficult to access. It is a very important forest, but we don't have much data. And in Guatemala, something important to continue expanding eBird data is ecotourism and bird watching. So how have you dealt with this challenge in areas that are very remote and difficult to access regarding eBird?
Should I answer in English or Spanish?
I think if you can answer in whichever language of your choice, I believe, if you're in the open session. It's just if you're in a specifically the English channel or the Spanish channel, it's easiest for Claudia to speak in that language.
Right. So just to clarify, Anna, we haven't done this in the Amazon yet. We want to, but we haven't. But we have done similar kind of projects in different regions of Colombia. And I think you're right that often avitourism, and I'm trying to do half English, half Spanish, that bird tourism is one of the major incentives for individuals to start utilizing eBird. But also what we've found in some of the areas that we've been working in is just the ease of using eBird for monitoring purpose is also a big draw. So in a lot of these areas where you have indigenous communities or communities that have ownership to their own land, and therefore are responsible for the management of those lands, normally that involves some kind of management plan, right? And that normally involves an interest in being able to monitor biodiversity in some shape or form. And eBird provides one of those avenues. And so that is kind of one of the ways we've managed to get uptake of eBird. But I think I would probably say has been most successful in Colombia in terms of just building out eBird across the country and into more and more remote regions has been taking part in the Global Bird Days. So Colombians go crazy every time there's a Global Bird Day, and as you've seen, Colombia wins in terms of the number of species year after year after year. And that is because it's become a big thing. And there's a lot of organization. Everybody across all the regions get together and they work out where they have to go to see all the species. And that community that's been built up around that has really helped kind of get eBird into areas where there aren't necessarily tourists arriving, but there are birds that we need to add to the list for Colombia for a given year. So that's been a really powerful tool in terms of engaging an ever bigger audience who then start to use eBird on a day-to-day basis just because they come birders. So there's been just a general strengthening of the birding community through a mixture of ecotourism, but I would say definitely also kind of, the Global Bird Days, and also the kind of this increasing emphasis on community-based monitoring of biodiversity. And so between the three of them, it just starts to build out the use of eBird and this community of people who move around using eBird.
Gracias, Nick.
Thank you, Nick.
Great. Any further questions for any of our presenters today? I think we unfortunately haven't been able to resolve technical issues for Bob's talk, but we're going to reschedule Bob's talk for our May session. And taking a look at the chat, yeah, Jenna suggested ARUs potentially where for areas where access is an issue or density of eBirders to supplement with autonomous recording units. But that's, of course, a data processing challenge as well. So potentially well suited for a few target species. And I don't have a lot of experience with ARUs myself, but it does seem to be like a field where things are developing rapidly. And so that's it's exciting. Yeah, I'll give one more opportunity for any last questions. I did a scan of the chat and didn't see any new ones, but if I missed any, please jump in. But if we don't have any further questions at this time, I'll just say thank you so much to the presenters for their awesome talks. It was great to learn about all the work that's going on and the different projects. Yeah, and really excited to hopefully hear more about where they're going in the future. Thanks everyone for coming today. I hope you enjoyed the lightning talks. I know I was happy to hear a little bit more about what folks are working on. And as I mentioned, we're going to do another round of lightning talks at our May meeting. So keep an eye out for more of these. And if you're interested in possibly giving a lightning talk on one of your projects, please feel free to reach out to us. We do have room for another presenter or two. And lastly, I just want to thank Claudia for doing the English-Spanish interpretation again for us today. We really appreciate it, and it's an integral part of this community. So thank you so much. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining today. And yeah, looks like we're pretty much ending right on time, so that's great.